Good morning and welcome to the officials from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited, as well as members of the media and the public. My name is Wade Mark. I'm the chairman of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. The Committee on Public Accounts Enterprises, or the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, has a mandate to consider and report to the both houses of Parliament on the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of all enterprises that are owned or controlled by or on behalf of the state. The Auditor General's report on any such accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements, and whether policy is carried out efficiently, effectively, and economically, and whether expenditure conforms to the authority which governs it. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee is to examine the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited for the period 2012 to 2017. Our committee is desirous of hearing about the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders at the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to these challenges. The role of our committee is to help the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Company Limited to improve its delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. May I inform you that this meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. May I at this time invite the officials from the Investments Division of the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, and the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited in that order to introduce themselves for the records. The Ministry of Finance Investment Division.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yvette Bab. I am the Acting Director of Social and Economic Transformation, Ministry of Finance, Investments Division.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Varun Ramdial, Senior Audit Analyst, Investments Division, Central Audit Committee.
Good morning, everyone. Kimberly Pascal, Acting Business Analyst, Ministry of Finance, Investments Division.
Good morning. Ramde Sukhdev, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Good morning. I'm Neela Maraj, Acting Director, Agricultural Planning Division, Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries.
Good morning. My name is Joan Smith, and I'm a Planning Officer 1 at the Agriculture Planning Division, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Any other officials from the Ministry of Agriculture? If not, we go to Palo Seco.
Good morning. My name is Lionel Wayne Deshay, and I'm the chairman of the board of Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited.
Good morning, Chairman, members. My name is Laura Williams-Pran. I am currently the interim CEO of Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited.
Good morning, everyone. I am Elizabeth Mohammed Ali. I am the Vice Chairman and the Chairman of the Lands and Projects Committee.
Could you kindly switch off your mics? Those who are behind you, could you?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Adrian Jeffers, Director and Chairman of the Finance and Investment Committee of PSAEL.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jeffers. Those behind?
Good morning, everyone. I am Keisha Whitaker, Geotechnical Engineering Consultant with Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sabrina Singh, the Corporate Secretary of Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited.
Good morning, everyone. Sasha Sinanan, Consultant Legal Counsel to PSAEL.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Geeta Ramprasad, Director at PSAEL, Chairman of Audit Committee.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandra Elcock Stanislaus, Director and Chairman of the P&O Committee.
Anybody else?
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I am Farrell Filbert, Director and Chairman of the Tenders Committee.
Thank you all. Before I invite the acting permanent or deputy permanent secretary to make to make a brief opening remark. Oh, yes. Sorry, sir. My error. May I take this opportunity to invite my colleagues to formally introduce themselves? Sorry about that. I start on my immediate right.
Thank you kindly, Chairman. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am Jennifer Baptiste Primus, and I am a member of this committee.
Good morning. I'm Tim Gopi Singh, Vice Chair of this committee.
Good morning. Amrita Deonarain, member of the committee.
Thank you all. Yes, before I proceed to ask or to invite the Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to make a brief opening remarks, or some brief opening remarks, as well as the Chairman of the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Company Limited. May I advise all present, if you have mobile phones, put all on silent or on vibrate. And when you are about to speak, there is a button you press, a red light will emerge, and when you are through, you press that set button and the red light will disappear so that the other person can have full audio when he or she is speaking. May I now invite the Deputy Permanent Secretary to make a few opening remarks at this time.
Chairman, other members of the committee, distinguished panel, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries has oversight of 9 state agencies or state enterprises. The Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited, PSAEL as you call them, is one of them. Please note that PSAEL has been realigned with different ministries a number of times in the past. The last realignment was with the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, and that was on the 19th of September 2017. We are happy to be here to clarify issues with regards to PSAEL and our oversight of this state enterprise. Unfortunately, the PS of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Ms. Lydia Jacob, was unavoidably absent today.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, morning to you and your panel. Mr. Chairman, we consider it a privilege to share with this committee our audited financial statements for the financial years ended October the 1st, 2012 to September the 30th, 2017. Our audited financial statements are on time and without qualification. Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited was formed out of a predecessor company called the Seco Estates Limited and incorporated on October 11, 1956 as a wholly owned subsidiary of Trinidad Petroleum Development Company. The company had various name changes over the period, as the name changed on November 16, 1977 to Trinidad Tesoro Agricultural Company Limited, and again on January 8, 1986 to its current operating name. From inception to the mid-90s, the main focus of the company was agricultural. In 1995, the Ministry of Finance directed PSAEL to manage the agricultural and residual land holdings of the Trinidad and Tobago Oil Company Limited and Trinidad and Tobago Petroleum Company Limited. In 2006, the company was incorporated as a special purpose state enterprise under the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure. PSAEL, like other state enterprises, was incorporated as part of the government's initiatives to accelerate the delivery of the structure required to advance the country's social and economic development towards the achievement of the 2020 developed country status. Between 2007 and 2008, the company under the Ministry of Local Government was responsible for providing infrastructural development in communities across the southwestern peninsula of Trinidad, while continuing to provide services to Petrotrin and its predecessor companies. In September of 2013, PSAEL reported directly to the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure. On September 11, 2015, PSAEL was under the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. PSAEL's land holdings comprise 5,122 acres, which was focused mainly in Palo Seco, Quarry, and Kora area, with a large percentage of the acreage unoccupied. Effective September 19, 2017, PSAEL was under the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, was given a new mandate to lease lands for agricultural purposes and to maintain its current arrangement with Petrotrin and other state owners of land. In light of the new mandate from the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, and with the closure of Petrotrin on November 30th, 2018, PSAEL has directed its efforts to the generation of revenue from land management services and the monetization of its land assets. It currently has a land management services arrangement with Trintoc, Trintopec, and BHP Billiton. Attempts are currently being made to solicit land management services from other state and private entities, while approval for additional services on Trintoc and Trintopec are pending. Pursuant to the Miscellaneous Provisions Act No. 17 of 2018, 3,725 acres of PSAEL lands were vested in Heritage Petroleum Limited, with PSAEL retaining an estimated 1,397 acres of land. The intent now is to establish the land use priorities with a view to generate revenue while allocating these lands in an equitable, legal, and sustainable manner. Additional efforts are currently ongoing to operationalize PSAEL's oil sand quarry pursuant to its mining license from the Ministry of Energy and Industries. Preliminary investigations have also commenced on the commercialization of potential mineral resources from PSAEL lands in the southwestern peninsula. PSAEL continues to have the potential for offering premium land management services and is well positioned with a rich institutional experience, and heritage in land management. It continues to function without a subvention. It's compliant with all statutory requirements and poised to take advantage with a new strategic focus in the efficient and effective management of lands. Mr. Chairman, please note that the period under review is 2012 to 2017. However, this board was appointed in 2018. I have with me members of the board and management, and we will approach and answer your question as a team. May I also indicate that our financial accountant has also reported ill this morning, so we are also at that disadvantage. But we will attempt to answer all the questions you asked.
And how long your financial accountant has been with the company?
About 5 years.
5 years?
2 years.
2 years now. Are you through, Mr. Chair? Thank you very much. At this time, I'll ask the Vice Chairman of our committee to lead off in seeking some clarification on the operations of this very important state enterprise. So, Dr. Yes, and Dr. Gopi Singh has a very important commitment, and he will have to leave us at around 11:15. So, just walk around that time. So, I'll ask him to lead off at this time. Dr. Gopi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all members here this morning. The first issue I would seek to, on behalf of the committee, get some understanding and appreciation of is your acreage which you're supposed to be responsible for. From your history that you just gave and from what you submitted to us, it's approximately 5,100 acres of land that you had under your control. And from 2015, 3,725 acres were vested in Petrotrin, pursuant to the Petrotrin vesting order, number 27 of 2015. And from Parliament recently, we heard that this land was now vested in Heritage, the company Heritage. How could you explain the vesting from where you were, PSAEL, to Petrotrin, to Heritage? Where is it now? Has it been vested in Heritage, or is it still with Petrotrin?
Vice Chair, if I may. Pursuant to the initial vesting of the 3,725 acres, by virtue of the Vesting Act, Vesting Order 15 of 2015, those lands were vested by virtue of that order. However, title to the lands were not transferred to Petrotrin. So the lands, in essence, remained with PSAEL. Those lands are under freehold interest. By virtue of the 2018 order, I should say Miscellaneous Provisions Act, the same acreage, 3,725 acres of PSAEL lands, were transferred in favor of Heritage. What it means is that the lands remain with PSAEL, title to the lands were not transferred to Petrotrin, so I believe the intent now is to transfer title to Heritage. Now, if I may just add, although the lands were transferred, when we saw the legislation, they weren't properly demarcated. And pursuant to the first order in 2015, they were listed and identified. But again, proper demarcation was not done. And on those lands, PSAEL has critical obligations. And when I say critical, it's such that we have a legal and social responsibility to tenants pursuant to the Land Tenant Security of Tenure Act. So even though those lands are vested, we have a legal obligation to tenants on portions of those lands. Another thing too, as a result of it not being demarcated, portions of the lands, well, they are identified by blocks. So portions of these blocks have oil interests, they are oil installations, so we assume that the portions that have the oil installations are what they are interested in. But the challenge is, although it has been transferred or vested by virtue of the Miscellaneous Provisions Act in 2018, proper or formal title was not transferred. So the lands, in terms of title, remains with PSAEL.
If I'm to get you clearly, that 3,725 acres of those acres owned by PSAEL they have the title to it, but they're not properly delineated. And that title was supposed to be transferred to Petrotrin. It was not. And that same title was supposed to be transferred from Petrotrin to Heritage, and it has not, because PSAEL still holds the title to the land. So when it is mentioned that the vesting order will effect a transfer, any vesting order has, well, possibly has gone on, but the title of the land still belongs to PSAEL, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about the delineation of the property, of the lands. Could you just explain a little more for us when you say that it has not been properly delineated?
In order to explain this, I will need to refer to the vesting order of 27 of 2015, which first transferred the assets to Petrotrin. What it did, the order listed all the blocks to be transferred. And even though it listed all the blocks, there was a notation that stated portions to be transferred in the order. There were no surveys attached to that order to identify what portions were transferred from the blocks to Petrotrin. So that is what I mean. They weren't properly demarcated or delineated. So really and truly, that's why I said earlier, some of the blocks, there are oil installations or rigs, whatever, oil facilities on the blocks. And we're assuming that the portions that contain those facilities are what they are interested in terms of the transfer. But definite demarcation has not been done. So it's up in the air in terms of what portions of these blocks really belong to, really should be vested in Petrotrin, and now by virtue of the 2018 Act, in Heritage. And again, as a result of that, it left us in a situation because we have tenants, statutory tenants, on portions of those blocks. So, and I would refer to an exercise we did recently in-house where we tried to identify the blocks that were transferred. And when we looked at it, the majority of the blocks in Palo, Seco, where the majority of our statutory tenants are, will be affected. But as a result of there being no demarcation, it left us in a challenging situation because we have an obligation to these tenants. So that's my explanation.
What I'm getting from you is a very concerned confusion in terms of the land parcels and which are supposed to have been given over or by the vesting order to Heritage, but you don't know where it belongs, what they really want. So the 3,725 acres that the claim have been vested onto Heritage, you don't know what has really been vested. And the title still belongs to you all. And then the other 1,000 plus acres, so which ones are you still responsible for? Because you are now under the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries by virtue of the new realignment. So what parcel are you all still responsible for? Is it the 5,000 plus acres or the 3,725 or the difference between 3,720, the 1,397 acres? Which ones you're responsible for now?
Currently, we are still responsible for the 5,100 acres because officially, legal title to these assets, these lands, these blocks were not transferred. And again, because of our commitments, we are obligated under legal terms to treat with those blocks. So we are responsible for the entirety.
So at the moment, the Heritage Company, which has just been formed, doesn't know what oil fields or what oil acreage they really have within that 5,000 acres because they have not been surveyed properly. So how are you managing, how is PSAEL managing the oil acreage within that 5,000 acres? How do you know which is oil? How do you know which is agricultural land? Because the Ministry of Agriculture is now asking you to manage the agricultural land. So how do you know of the 5,100 acres, what is oil producing, what is under oil tenancy, and what is agricultural? I see massive confusion there, and I'm sure you related that. Could you give us some clarity if you can?
We have been managing these lands for quite some time. And we have a rich record in terms of the location and the use of these lands. So as a result of our continuous surveillance exercise, we haven't not just yet prepared a land use plan, but we have a land policy that guides us. So for instance, on those blocks that we own, if there are oil installations, we have to ensure that we maintain the setback distances. There are certain standards and setback distances that must be maintained according to the Ministry of Energy. So could you just repeat, I feel as though I'm straying from the question. Could you please repeat the question in terms of what exactly you want clarification on?
Yes, so
Yeah.
the 5,000 plus acres of land you have, 3725 or whatever supposed to have gone to heritage, the rest for agriculture or kept for agriculture under Ministry of, your whole new portfolio is now under Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries. But you have oil production on your land. How are you managing that confusion? Which is agriculture, which is oil production, and who are your tenants on your land? Are there companies that are producing oil on the land? And if so, are you getting royalties, or who is getting it? Where does PSAEL come?
Okay.
And that the royalties are collected by the Ministry of Finance from the Ministry of Energy. How is that being done?
Of the 5,000 acres, all of the lands are zoned for agriculture, historically. Portions of some of these blocks have oil installations on those. And those oil installations are specifically treated with by Petrotrin. PSAEL has no jurisdiction over those. So we have maps that clearly identify where those oil installations are. So we are aware and we know where. In terms of our agricultural lands, portions of some have been changed to residential use. Some of them have been changed to institutional use as well as commercial. So although we are now aligned with the Ministry of Agriculture, and our current mandate is strictly, well, I shouldn't say strictly, but aligned with leasing lands for agricultural use, we still have obligations in terms of leases for commercial, industrial, institutional, as well as residential. But all our lands are agricultural, are zoned for agricultural use. In order to treat with the uses that exist thereon, we get or obtain permission from Town and Country for change of use. But currently, all the lands, even the ones upon which oil installations are located thereon. In terms of royalties, PSAEL's arrangement, or I should say former arrangement with Petrotrin, Legacy Petrotrin now, we had no interactions or no responsibility to treat with loyalties on behalf of that company. We treat with the non-core oil assets. So we treat with their tenants on their behalf and mostly managing the lands, non-oil lands on their behalf.
So if I'm to conclude my questions with you, would you be able to give this committee an appreciation of the acreage utilized by the oil production area, and would you be able to identify the sizes of these, and then what is used for your other 4 areas that you spoke about? Are there untenanted people on your land? Because we have been hearing about that as well. So could you give us an appreciation of what acreage is for oil, how much for the other areas? You have that answer now, or you'd want to?
Because of the challenge I mentioned earlier, as it relates to these parcels and the demarcation of the blocks, I am unable at this time to provide that information in terms of what portions of the land are allocated for oil use or oil mining, and what portions are under industrial, residential, and the other uses.
Right, fine. So the 3725 acres which have been vested now to Heritage, that 3725, the title still held by PSAEL, but they also have oil production areas on that land as well as non-oil production areas.
Yes.
All right, thanks.
Follow-up from what my colleague had asked earlier. Would you say, Mrs. Laura Williams, the acting chief executive officer, the 2 legal orders in 2015 issued vesting 3,725 acres of lands that were under your jurisdiction to Petrotrin. That order is just a paper order. And the reason why it is a paper order is because legal title still rests with the Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited. So Petrotrin, in Legacy Petrotrin, at that material time, in 2015, had a legal notice, a legal order, but that order could not have been effected because title still remained with Seco Agricultural Enterprises. Am I right?
Yes, you are. In terms of these parcels are still with PSAEL, as the transfer of them has not been officially done. So title to it still remains with PSAEL. You're correct.
Can I ask you further? The legal notice vesting, that is vesting the same amount of lands to Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, but with Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited still being in effective ownership of the title of those lands, amounting to 3,725. Can I conclude, as I did earlier, that that legal vesting order is just a paper vesting order, because effectively title remains with Seco Agricultural Enterprises Company Limited? Am I right?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to defer that question to our legal lawyer on our board, Mrs. Elcock, who has a more in-depth appreciation of the
Yes.
legality of the system.
Yes, can I ask Mrs. Edwards to help us?
President, good morning once again. It is just clear to say that even though the vesting order has been published, there are processes that need to be followed thereafter to move title from just the paper to the actual ownership. So there will be surveys have to be conducted, there will be valuation have to be conducted, there will have to be registration. That entire process is what is missing. And that just moves from the paper to the actual ownership. And that was never done. So hence, the ownership of the land is retained by PSAEL from 2015, and then it has again been vested in 2018, and that process has to be done.
So effectively what you're saying, madam, is that the lands that were supposed to be properly vested in accordance with the procedures outlined by your good self, those procedures not being effected mean that the lands are effectively in the ownership and control of the Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited. Am I right?
Well said, sir.
Now, what I would like to clarify further is this. Can you provide this committee, the legal advisor to Seco, can you provide us in writing the actual process or stages that must be followed upon the issuance of a vesting order where one agency is seeking to have lands effectively transferred to another? Can you provide us with that in writing so we, as members of this committee, can have an appreciation of it? Because we have had two instances where in 2015 and 2018, vesting orders have been issued legally, but the processes and stages and phases that are supposed to be completed in order to give proper effect to that order still are pending. So we would like to have clarification. I would like to ask the acting CEO if she can clarify, or the chairman, or even the legal advisor. Can you tell this committee how many statutory tenants are there at this time under your legal control on the Seco Agriculture Enterprises lands comprising 5,000 and plus acres? How many?
There are 532 tenants.
500?
Yeah, 32.
32. These are legally statutory tenants. Can you also share with this committee whether there are, I don't want to say trespassers, but are there persons who have occupied illegally spaces that are under your jurisdiction? And if that has happened, can you tell this committee how many illegal visitors you have on your premises or on the land spaces that you are supposed to be effectively in charge of. Can you share with this committee?
PSAEL does have illegal persons on our land spaces, and we have approximately 178 persons pursuant to our last verification exercise.
Can you tell us what steps are you taking to either regularize those persons who are in occupation, or what steps you are taking to address their illegal occupation?
Of the 178 persons, there are persons who do not qualify to be regularized pursuant to our land policy. And those persons, our initial reaction is to serve them a notice to quit. Of the ones who qualify pursuant to our policy, we invite them to apply to formalize the occupation, and then we go through PSAEL's process in terms of regularization, which entails obtaining our requisite board's approval and subsequently forwarding it to get cabinet's approval.
How many would you say out of the 100 and how many?
78.
How many out of the 178 would you say would qualify according to your records, and therefore it will leave us with the balance as being not qualified?
Of the 178 I stated before, according to our records, we have approximately 53 persons we have identified who cannot be regularized. And the remainder, we are proceeding with them in terms of treating with their regularization.
All right. Could you tell us, I read somewhere in your submission that you were having some difficulty in collecting tenancy fees, license fees, and this has been going on for some time now. In fact, if my memory doesn't fail me, since 2011, we have had some challenges in that department. Could you share with us what is the situation with that? Is the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited, as it relates to statutory tenants, the over 500 that you mentioned, are they paying fees? Are they paying rent? What are they paying? And are you actually collecting, or do you have a challenge in collecting those fees from those tenants that are in legal occupation?
Of the 532 tenants that we have, 213 of these persons, their tenancies have expired. So as a result of that, we are in the process now of regularizing them, which will take the form of issuing normal leases, not statutory leases. So they will be subject to rents at open market rates. Of the remaining, they are pursuant to that, the Land Tenant Security of Tenure Act, they are subject to peppercorn rents. And the only challenge really that we have been facing with these persons is when these tenants die, what happens is you tend to find that we don't have the legal personal representatives or the appropriate representatives coming forward. And we have instances where persons have even migrated, or the tenancies are not properly administered, so we are unable to advance the proper transfers so that we could continue with rent collections and so on. So issues pertaining to the debt of the tenants is where we have challenges. However, PSAEL is obligated by law to continue with collection of these peppercorn rents once these persons submit their notice to renew within the stipulated period.
And what is the method employed in collecting these rents, particularly those who have not exceeded their period and you want to give them new leases? How do you collect rents from these people? Do they come and knock on your door, your office, and give you $2 and say, this is my rent? How is it done?
Yes, we have a cashier at our offices in Pointe-a-Pierre, and they come to us and make their rent payments.
You want to share with us what is the rent? Is it yearly? Is it peppercorn? Is it $1.50, 25 cents? Peppercorn rent. How much each tenant is asked to pay given the Land Tenant Security Regulation Act under that?
In the majority, those rents are around $7.20.
Is that yearly?
Yes, yearly.
Can I ask you, on that 3,000 plus acreage, how many oil-producing wells are on that? Are there oil-producing wells on that acreage? And if there is, how many are there?
There are, but at this time, I am unable to advise on that matter. Our interest is not really these oil-producing wells. Our land management services allow us to be aware of them, but not to quantify them. So as a result, I'm not in possession of that information, so I cannot provide that information.
But you have title for the land, but you're unaware of where these wells are and who are operating these oil-producing wells within that acreage. Is it just the former Petrotrin?
Legacy Petrotrin held an agreement with us, a head lease, for some of the blocks upon which they have their oil-producing activities ongoing.
So those blocks are identified?
Yes, they are listed on the agreement.
Right. Is it just Petrotrin alone have these blocks, or are they leased to any other company for production of oil, as far as you are aware?
According to our records, and as far as I am aware, it's just Petrotrin
that is producing oil on this acreage. Is there active production of oil, as you are aware, because you are the owner?
I am unable to comment on that in terms of whether it's active or inactive.
All right, thanks.
Yes. May I ask, what is the total sum of, let's say, do you collect taxes? Because you also said you collect licenses or license fees. And you also have these peppercorn rents that you collect. Would you want to share with us, or this committee, what is the total sum of taxes, fees, rents outstanding to the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Committee? Do you have that figure as at the end of, at the current time, or?
I do not have that figure at this time. Same can be provided at a later time.
In writing. Because I would have wanted to ask you, even though you don't have those figures, how have those figures impacted on your operation, your income generation activity? I realize that you are self-sufficient, meaning that you don't get any government subvention based on what Mr. the chairman of your company said a short while ago. So every cent, every dollar is needed for you to survive. So I wanted to know how this outstanding sum could be or may be affecting your income, revenue generation activity. So maybe you can put that in writing, or if You want to share with us now, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We, as we indicated earlier, before we were moved to the Ministry of Agriculture, PSAEL was engaged in project management activities, and the income generation came from project management fees, and that is how PSAEL conducted its operations. But as you rightfully said, because we do not receive a subvention, all income coming into the company is welcome and useful for its operations at this point in time. As you would recognize from our submissions, we are owed quite a lot of outstanding revenues from a lot of these project management activities, and we are in the process of trying to recover these funds.
I'll ask Mrs. Batiste Primus at this time, and then Mrs. Dionarine, and then I'll come back because I have a number of questions to raise.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman, and good morning once again. Mr. Chairman, your board is of recent vintage. You indicated that. When in 2018 was the board appointed?
The board was appointed in May of 2018.
In the responses you gave, you spoke about the strategic plan of the organization. The present strategic plan is not in alignment with the new mandate of the company. Yes?
Some of it.
All right. Could you share with this committee what is the new mandate of the company?
Our mandate, as outlined from our directors from our Ministry of Agriculture, is to land management and of agricultural holdings, and primarily.
So that is the board in the process of reviewing the strategic plan?
Yes, we are.
How far along are you all with regards to the review of that strategic plan?
We have just begun the review of the plan. So we are still working with the old plan, and we are looking to tweak this particular plan because some of it is still useful, right? But because we have been moved away from our project management activities and into this new mandate, we are looking to rationalize the existing plan at this point in time.
Could you share with this committee what was some of the delays what is the revenue generation potential of the PSAEL lands?
At this point in time, we are looking at two areas. We have, at this point in time, we are looking at our mining license with the Ministry of Energy with respect to oil sands quarry, and we are also looking at mining of some sedimentary sands in the southwestern peninsula of the country as well. Those are the two areas of revenue generation at this point in time that we are primarily looking at.
I want to turn a little to, so would you say that would present PSAEL with a diversified stream of income?
Yes, I will say what we have been doing is that we are continuing to reduce our expenditure. And so our expected income from these two sources of these two activities, we expect those things to cover our expenses.
Mr. Chairman.
Can I also add that we also still have some land management services agreements with Trinidad and Trinidad, and I believe, BHP Billiton, right? So we also receive revenue from those sources.
All right. I think I heard early on a statement that a large percentage of the land under discussion remain unoccupied. I can't recall if it is you, Mr. Chairman, or your interim CEO, but what percentage of the lands are occupied by squatters?
I would say approximately 30% of our lands.
30?
Yeah, is occupied by squatters.
And what is PSAEL? Have you all taken a decision to regularize these squatters? What is the decision taken with regards to these squatters? Mr. Chairman? Well, it has to be a board decision before it reaches the CEO.
We take direction from the reports that come to our board from our land section. We also follow the legal aspects of the acts that guide the illegal occupation of our lands, and we make decisions based on that. All right, so we take our advice from our land estate supervisor, and we act on those things.
So that PSAEL has 532 tenants. I think it's you, Madam CEO, interim CEO, would have given that information. So you have 532 legal tenants. Are you in a position to say how many illegal, meaning squatters, exist?
Earlier, I would have conveyed that we have approximately 178 squatters on our lands, and a portion of that amount is currently being regularized, and a minority. I would have given the figures before.
You're not only responding to me, you're speaking to the public of Trinidad and Tobago. They wouldn't have that information.
Let me give you the figures again. Approximately 178 persons are illegal on our lands, and of that amount, we have identified 53 persons who we are unable at this time to regularize, and for reasons that either they are close to an oil installation, which is really unsafe for their occupation, or we just cannot regularize because of the location, the nature of the structure, and the law in terms of the Regularization Act and our policy.
How often does PSAEL survey the land it manages to prevent new squatters from coming on board?
We do surveillance on a monthly basis.
And are you all in receipt? Have you all looked at this situation? Has a pattern emerged? Approximately how many new squatters enter PSAEL lands at any given time? Because if you survey monthly, then I would want to believe that you're on top of the game.
Yes, I will admit that we are, in the sense that on a monthly basis, we have a fixed rate, and we have it's usually regular. 1 or 2 we would pick up in terms of illegal occupation. And immediately, either we will issue verbal notices to quit, or we will issue written formal notices to quit, followed by subsequent notices where we see failure to comply, and then we will go to either litigation or demolition.
All right. How long have you been the interim CEO?
For approximately 1 month.
This is more than recent vintage. Mr. Chairman, what steps are being taken to recover bad debts by the company? Is there any robust plan to do so?
Yes, we have been, and before my time, the past board and the past management team, they have been writing and visiting. If you look at the list of the bad debts, most of the bad debts are state enterprises and ministries of agriculture. We have a directive straight from the State Enterprise Performance Manual that states that we cannot litigate. We have to use other methods of trying to encourage our state brothers, sisters, family to pay us our funds because it's significant.
Have you all considered reaching out to the investment unit of the Ministry of Finance?
We have made those reports already. We have done those things.
Well, my question wasn't quite that, Mr. Chairman. I inquired whether or not you all had reached out for assistance because the Ministry of Finance possess officers of very wide and varied experiences and would understand what kind of strategy to use given any peculiar circumstances, because if these are state enterprises and ministries.
We have written, that's what I can tell you. Since this board has been in operation, we have aggressively pursued some of the entities, and we have been able to recover some of the funds. Right? There are some areas where the major part of the funding is tied up in some level of litigation, and which we cannot commit at this point in time.
Mr. Chairman, I will pause for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my first question is with relation to the project management services, right? So because you all no longer earn majority of your revenue from project management services, you all have basically moved away from that. Does that justify the reason for not having a project management unit?
Yes, because if we are no longer involved in projects, we have been mandated to move away from that activity. Right? We saw no need for us to have engineers and stuff.
Okay, so I see in your submissions that you all said that some ongoing training is taking place in the field of project management, or was that done already?
That may have been an error, and that is not happening at this point in time. You want this then? Hey, John?
That was for the period under review, which is
2012 to 2017?
That's right, correct.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the submission the chair asked for on the detailed assessment of the different procedures that you all need to follow in order to vest or to transfer the ownership of the assets, right? Is it also possible to provide in that submission, Chair, if you permit, to indicate whose responsibility each one of those procedures fall under?
We will provide the answer along with your request as well.
Thank you. So with respect to the illegal occupiers of the land, given that you said your last estimation was around 178 illegal occupiers of the land, that verification would have been last month?
That verification was done late 2017.
But wasn't it, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it previously indicated that the assessment of new illegal occupiers of the land is being monitored on a monthly basis?
Yes, we do surveillance on a monthly basis, but in terms of the figures according to our records, the last verification exercise was done late 2017.
When do you expect the next verification exercise to be conducted?
We will conduct one soon for the reason that we intend to move quickly and advance in terms of our leasing and regularizing of these occupants. So we earmarked to conduct one soon, but the challenge is resources, manpower.
With respect to the 53 persons who cannot be regularized, based on your last assessment, which was late 2017, and you outlined the reasons why they cannot be regularized, what exactly will happen with them? They would be given notice that they need to vacate?
Our initial step when we identify an illegal person on our lands is to serve a notice, either verbal or in written. And we will give them a number of notices, for the most 5, to give them enough time to remove themselves from the land. If it is a situation where they are close to an oil installation and it is unsafe and a risk for them in terms of their occupation there, we will attempt to remove them or proceed to litigation.
Okay, all right. So I want to move to page 16 of your submission, where you all would have spoken about the risk management. And I see here that you all do not have a standard risk management policy. Could you outline the reason or reasons for not having a formal risk management policy?
We inherited this position, and at this point in time, we use the State Enterprise Performance Manual and to guide our risk management issues.
Okay, so as part of your new strategic plan, would a comprehensive risk management policy be incorporated?
We intend to do so. We will review we are reviewing the present strategic plan, and we will put the issues that are lacking in place.
Okay, so given that you all are following the State Enterprise Performance Monitoring Manual to identify and mitigate risks up to this point, can you identify what risks you all have mitigated in the past?
Answer that? The risks that were mitigated in the past can be found in the internal audit reports, which is in the I think Schedule F in this manual here.
Okay. All right. But, all right. Now, I want to move to the fraud policy and whistleblowing policy. Do you all have a fraud or whistleblowing policy in place?
At present, we do not have a fraud or whistleblowing policy, as far as I'm aware.
Was fraudulent activities ever identified or detected in the past?
Our audit report would have indicated any activity in that area, and there would have been recommendations would have been made, and those things would have been corrected from the advice given to management.
Okay, so therefore, given that it may have been identified in the internal and external audit process in the past, do you see a need for having and ensuring that having a
a fraud policy and whistleblowing policy as part of your strategic plan in the future?
I would say so, yes.
Okay. I will pause for now, Mr. Chair.
I have a few questions to ask Ministry of Agriculture and Seco. First of all, when you mention acting CEO, that 30% of the lands of Seco agricultural enterprises are under illegal occupation. Is it 30% of 5,177 acres? Or is it 30% of your portion that when you move away, when this proper title is given? Or are you operating on the basis, well, if I were you, I would operate on the basis of 5,177 until further notice. Can you advise us 30% of the 5,000?
Yes, it is 30% of the entire amount, 5,000.
No, I did a rough calculation unless my math's crazy. But I'm seeing some over 1,536 acres of land. Now, I don't know if that is my crazy math, but I cannot understand how a minority, and we talk about 72 persons or 78 persons, and out of the 78, 53, no, I think it's 178, if I'm, just remind me, I don't get the figures wrong. How many persons are illegally occupying your lands at this time? Is it 178?
Further to our last surveillance verification exercise, it is 178.
178.
Yeah.
And out of the 178, we have about 53 that whose arrangement or whose occupation cannot be regularized. Is that correct?
Correct.
Good. Therefore, it means that if we are generous, we have 178 persons, including those who cannot be regularized, occupying 30% of the lands of Seco, and when we boil it down, on average, each man and woman on that piece of land is in possession of about 9 acres, roughly, on average. So I would like the Seco company to provide to this committee in writing a detailed breakdown of every single tenant or every single occupier of your lands, and from the survey that you have conducted, how many acres each occupy. Because we're talking about 1,536 acres of land, state land, the people's land, that is occupied by 178 persons, including the 53 undesirables that you mentioned, who are not qualifying to be there in any event. So give us a detailed breakdown, because you must, as land managers, be able to know how many acres of land these 178 persons are in occupation of. Am I right?
Mr. Chairman, we will do an update of the verification as close as we can, and we will provide you with that answer in writing.
We like that. I also, I want to compliment the Seco Agricultural Enterprises Committee, company rather, even though you have recent vintage in terms of being in occupation at the board level, for being able to be almost surviving without any state support and or assistance. I don't know of any state enterprise that I am aware of that does that. I think you might be unique in that regard. I can't recall one state enterprise, if they are not self-sufficient in terms of generating their own profits, many of them depend on the state for support. So I want to say that this is very important. When I look at the history of your organization, you initially started off in agriculture and you were involved in the production of agriculture. You produce citrus and other fruits. But you no longer do so based on your mandates that have changed over the years. I have observed from the submissions that you have made that you have no security. I see security in terms of expenses, $500 for 2017. In 2016, $17,418. How can you manage, maintain, and secure 5,177 acres of state land without a security unit? I don't understand. If you could explain to this committee, or maybe we missed something, maybe you do have a security force, and maybe you will explain to us how many members make up that security force, and how do they go about securing the 5,177 acres. Because I dare say, if you had a security force, I cannot see where strangers can invade your space and occupy and seize 30% of your land if you had proper security. So explain to this committee, do you have security? Do you have a security service? Do you have a security force to secure your property and your land that you are responsible for? Can you explain?
Mr. Chairman, PSAEL does not have a security firm. We do not have an enforcement unit. But what happened in the past as a result of our relationship with Petrotrin? Petrotrin had a security unit, and their security unit would assist us in terms of enforcement. When we have to issue our notices to quit and so on, they will treat with that on our behalf. And any encroachment that they observe, they will assist us. So our security or enforcement was highly dependent on support from Petrotrin's security. As a result of their closure in November and pursuant to our realignment, we are currently in the process. Well, we have identified that challenge now, and that is something we have identified in our proposed org structure for the organization. However, plans are afoot to have enforcement in place, and what we are doing in terms of our notices to quit and so on, we're going to outsource assistance to serve those things, to effect the notices to quit. So that's the support that we have right now.
Yeah. Now, it means to say that the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Company Limited is really faced with severe challenges, very severe challenges. And if you are not careful, the rate at which illegal entry is being made onto your lands, within a very short period of time, you may go from 30% to maybe 90%, and you'll be held hostage. This is something that the Line Ministry and the Ministry of Finance have to take on board very seriously. Now, we have seen from a document that was submitted by the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited that a survey in 2000 revealed that there were 1,500 squatters on lands owned and managed by the PSAEL. And these squatters occupied at least 200 acres. That is what we are seeing in a document that was submitted by your good self. That is the Palo Seco. So I find it strange that if a survey in 2000 revealed 1,500 squatters, how that could boil down to 178, and out of the 178, 53 undesirable. Something is wrong in your company, and I'll tell you why I say so. You have no security. You have no security. So you have to depend on whatever labor force or personnel you have within your area, and on Petrotrin. Petrotrin is dead, buried, it's gone to heaven. So you have no more Petrotrin to depend on. So you have to depend on your own strength. But I have noticed, and this is where I come to the Ministry of Agriculture, how can a company operate with 16 members of staff after having a complement in 2015 of 48, remained 48 in 2016. No, I'm wrong. Let me just get the correct figure for you. There's vacancies I'm talking about here. Let me deal with the numbers of, yes, I have the numbers here. No, I have the numbers here. In 2016, the figures I have here, 55. 2016, 47. 2017, 37. 2018 rather, 16. And in 2012, there was 72. I would like the Ministry of Agriculture, Land, and Fisheries to tell this committee whether it is the intention of the Ministry of Agriculture to close down the PA, the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited, because you cannot move from a staff of 72 in 2012, 48 in 2016, to 16 in 2018, And what is even more alarming, inexplicable, and baffling is that the Ministry of Agriculture, by correspondence dated November the 21st, 2017, instructed, directed the Seco Agricultural Enterprises Company to cease all recruitment and promotion, compensation change, or benefit enhancement unless approved by the ministry. Now, I don't know, the Deputy PS, could you tell us what is the status of this decision? Whether you have changed that decision? And what are you doing to help this company or to assist this company? Because this company, to me, is on the verge of collapse and closure, the way they are going. By the next year, they will go from 16 to 10. And the next year, they go on to 5. And the next year, 0. And the company dead, closed. Explain to this committee this directive issued to Seco, indicating they cannot recruit anybody, they cannot promote anybody. How is this company to survive? How is it to grow? How is it to carry out its mandate if the line ministry put it in a cold storage? It does not make sense to this chairman. So I am asking you to clarify to this committee this development. It is disturbing.
I have no, I wasn't aware that the PSAEL is on the verge of closure or anything like that. What I do know is that the mandate has changed, and hence they are relooking the strategic plan and the intent of the organization. I could review that, that letter, that request that was made of PSAEL, and provide the information at a later date, because I'm not aware of that being the mandate. But I know as a line ministry, PSAEL and any other state agency, we could always have a discussion as to, you know, what the needs are, what the issues they're facing, the challenges, and we could come up with a compromise of some sort. If that was a mandate, it may have been a policy decision that the permanent secretary would not have, you know, had any control over.
Madam Deputy, Permanent Secretary, the correspondence, you may not have been there, or if you were there, maybe you occupy some other position. It is dated November the 21st, 2017.
I will look into it, Chairman.
So what I'm saying is that we would like a copy of this correspondence. Please submit a copy of this correspondence to this committee, dated 21st of November.
Mr. Chair, can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
We have been directed, but we are working on reorganizing the company. We have a new organizational structure, which we have completed, and we are sending to the ministry for approval. And the complement of the staff members will be 18. That's the structure that we have at this point in time. We are still waiting. We are awaiting approvals to put this thing in place, and we would like to have it done as quickly as possible. So we are not going down. Hopefully, we are expecting to stabilize and go up.
You said 18 or 80?
18, because
18. Oh, 18.
Because of the movement away from the project management activity, which had a huge complement, plus the legal and estates department, we have reduced the numbers of the staff, particularly because the project management fees assisted with paying the large staff numbers. Now that we are no longer involved in project management activities, we have reduced our expenses to accommodate for this purpose.
May I ask, I am happy you raised that point. May I ask, on behalf of this committee, a company like yours that is self-sufficient in generating its own revenues should be encouraged and complimented when it is doing things that allows it to generate its own income. I cannot understand why, if you were getting a reasonable amount of revenue from project management fees, and you had moved away from agriculture, which I want to come back to in a short while, who directed your company to move away from that mandate of project management in terms of you being able to generate fees from that to make your organization more self-sufficient, and you'll have more persons that you can engage, even to the point of employing maybe security personnel to guard your property? Who took that decision? Was that a Ministry of Agriculture decision or your decision based on your strategic plan?
Mr. Chairman, I think you are in receipt of a letter from the Ministry of Agriculture.
No, I don't have a letter. I don't have a letter. That's why I've asked for that letter.
I believe there is a letter that was from the Ministry of Agriculture directing us to move away from project management activities into agriculture. And yeah.
That was what year, sir?
It was 2017.
Do you have a copy of that letter, sir? Do you have a copy of that letter?
We will provide you with that information.
Yes, I'll appreciate that very much. Now, you remember I made a statement very early that our committee, Mr. Chairman, is here to help your company. We want to make the company more efficient, more effective, more economical in its delivery of services of a quality nature to your stakeholders and your customers. That is what we are here for. And therefore, I would like to ask you or any member of the team, do you see merit in the company in a period of global instability, uncertainty, and even unpredictability, where food security is very critical to any decent and modernized civilization? Do you think that it is an area that is agricultural production that you had initially embarked upon earlier in your incarnation, in another incarnation, I should say? Would you say, or would you want to share with this committee whether this has ever crossed your mind or the minds of your board and your management in terms of further sustainability of your organization, getting into agricultural production once again where you were once located as well, in terms of diversification and gaining new sources of income or revenue? Could you share with this committee your thinking?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Now that we are aligned under the Ministry of Agriculture, the lands that are in our possession, we use the facilities to facilitate the other agencies that are under the mandate of the Ministry of Agriculture, particularly, and I believe you had them on your committee as well. The CDC, we are assisting them with some facilitation with the lands for their expansion of their cocoa production. So those are the things that we are doing as part of our remit. We are land management, agricultural land management, and in that case, we are facilitating the increase in agricultural production in those areas by facilitating those companies. That's where we are at this point in time.
That's cocoa.
Yes.
Well, any other areas?
we
Rice production, fruit
Yes.
production, vegetable production. You have 5,177 acres of land, the bulk of which we are told by the acting CEO, agricultural in nature. Agricultural in nature. So I'm saying, well, why don't you, as a forward-thinking company, look at that, focus on that area, look at that area. You're under the Ministry of Agriculture, and see to what extent you can diversify your sources of revenue.
We are also, as I said, we are facilitating, and we are also seeking cabinet approval for persons who are involved in the agriculture that you're speaking about, livestock, other agricultural enterprises. We are facilitating and encouraging those people, and by facilitating by assisting in acquiring some of PSAEL lands. Let me ask the Vice Chair to also elaborate on that.
Thank you again. Good day to everyone, including our viewing public, who I think that are key stakeholders in our enterprises as well, especially those in Southwest Trinidad. Chairman, I understand clearly what you're letting us know, but I want to tell you we have good news. And good news is that ever since we've been realigned under the Ministry of Agriculture, that has been our mandate, to empower as much as possible the return to agri-activity. And actually, Southwest Trinidad does have a rich histology of agri-activity. We had the old cocoa estates, Huggins estates. Those, people from that area will know what I'm speaking about. And I want to say that those lands were cocoa lands, but they were also livestock. In the Chatham district, we had the old Star Farm where milk was being produced. I don't know if you all may remember the Star Farm brand, right? We had, there was very active plantings being done in Kura Road, which was one of the major producing, that was when Petrotrin was doing their agri-activities. So there were history of successes agriculturally in Southwest Trinidad. So I'm saying that Southwest Trinidad, we do have the vacant lands. What we are doing right now is strategizing to marry the lands to the production initiatives. As a result of that, we did do a review of a land policy where we have now put in place for applicants to be reviewed by PSAEL. And we have been reviewing applicants. We have reviewed about 48 to date. And where we see that those applications can move forward, we require that you do a business proposal. As we all understand, it must make sense. It is state resources and it must be vested for success. And we are in the process now where we have proceeded to forward this to our line ministry for action. So there is work going on in this aspect.
I'm very happy to hear this. I just want to also ask, there are a number of legal matters involving the unfair dismissal of workers. I see several of them. And those matters, I would imagine, at the level of the courts. Could you give us an appreciation in writing? We may not want to share right now. Could you give us in writing the current status of these matters? in writing?
Yes, we will.
Appreciate that very much. Mrs. Batiste, Primus, you have any areas that you'd like to clarify? This is, yeah. May I? There are many other areas that we'll want to clarify, but what we'll do is to write to you, Mr. Chairman, the areas that we would like to further clarify as it relates to your institution. But one of the key areas I would like to get some answers, I'd like to get some responses on before we leave here, both from the Ministry of Finance and Agriculture. How are we going to address the tenuous security situation in terms of the protection of the lands of the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited? What steps would the Deputy PS want to advise the ministry would be taking in order to address this matter on an urgent basis? Because that is of concern to this committee based on what we have seen.
We might have to have a discussion as to the best approach, but I know at Land Management Division of Ministry of Agriculture, we have monitoring officers who go out and actually monitor the fields that are state land, right? So maybe we could look at a similar unit, you know, of persons to do that function, since they don't have any security. So that could be a discussion we'll have.
And can I ask the Ministry of Finance, I know that you deal with oversight and you understand what is taking place there. What advice can you offer as it relates to this threat where you have 30% of the state lands of the Palo Seco agricultural enterprises being occupied illegally by individuals? What kind of advice would you want to offer at this time, Ministry of Finance?
Chair, I think we will have to meet with the Ministry of Agriculture and Palo Seco to have a discussion with that before anything could be.
And I would like to suggest, I want to thank you very much. We'd like to get from the Palo Seco enterprises, agricultural enterprises, and the Ministry of Finance and Agriculture, if you all can submit a joint report to this committee within 1 month of today's date on how we are approaching this issue of security of the lands of the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited. We'd like to have that within 1 month. And Mr. Chairman, one final submission. We'd like you to submit to us any proposal in writing for the improvement of the organization. Because when we generate our report to the Parliament, as I told you, we want to improve your organization. So if you can share with this committee your thoughts on ways and means of improving and making your organization more efficient, more effective, and more economical, we would appreciate. So we look forward to you submitting in writing your proposals for our consideration. Before we bring down the curtains on our proceedings, I would like again to call, first of all, on the Deputy Permanent Secretary to make some brief closing remarks, to be followed by the Chairman before we bring the proceedings to a close.
I would like to just say thanks for asking us to come here to clarify issues. And it was certainly enlightening, I must say, and I appreciate the fact that, the committee is interested in looking at the challenges that PSAEL face and with a view of assisting in improving the services they offer. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Chair. I have a small statement. PSCL's current primary responsibility entails leasing lands for agricultural purposes and the management and surveillance of the non-oil assets of Trintoc, Trintopec, and other private companies. To this end, our strengths are a wealth of experience in estate and land management with a long history of servicing the non-core land assets of the oil and gas sector, making us well positioned to provide this service to all sectors. PSL still retains ownership of approximately 1,400 acres of land, and PSL intends to diversify its portfolio into additional income streams consistent with government's renewed focus in the agricultural sector and plans to significantly increase the sector's contribution to GDP and employment. We intend to become self-sufficient by establishing viable business ventures consistent with PSCL's mining license for oil sand, and also to commercialize our land assets with respect to other business ventures with our sedimentary materials. Finally, PSAEL has the potential to offer its skill sets to other private and state entities requiring our specialized services. I thank you very much.
Before we close, Mr. Chairman and Deputy Permanent Secretary, in your submission, that is the Palo Seco, there's a survey in 2000 that was conducted. Can you make available to us a copy of that survey? Because you put it in your statement.
In 2000?
Yes, a 2000 survey which revealed 1,500 squatters on the lands. So we want to get a copy. Yes?
Just a clarification, Chairman. Earlier, what I've mentioned and stated, PSAEL has 178 persons or squatters on its land space illegally there. That 1,500 that is stated in that document relates to not only lands of PSAEL, but lands of its agents, meaning Trintoc, Trintopec, and PSAEL. So it's a cumulative figure and not really relative just to PSAEL. So that 1,500 came out of approximately 26,000 acres.
All right, I just want to let you know that the report that I'm referring to is the audit report of the Land and Estate Management, and it's a final report on land and the estate management, Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises, Ramuta and Company, Chartered Accountants, dated October 2017. So I want to ask you to refer to that. All right. And in closing, if you can also provide us with a breakdown of all the changes that have been done, as you have indicated, from the tenant to residential to commercial, and is it industrial? If you can give us a breakdown of how many of these entities now occupy your space, we'll appreciate it as well. On behalf of this committee, may I thank the members of the Ministry of Finance for being here with us. We'd like to thank the members and officials of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. I would also like to thank all those officials from the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Company for being here. We'd like to thank the media, members of the public who viewed these proceedings, and we'd like to indicate to you that in the event that this committee deems it necessary to recall you, we shall do so, giving you the appropriate notice so that you can return. If not, well, we will have a report generated. One thing you can be assured of, you will have a lot of questions coming your way that you'll have to respond to before we generate our report to the Parliament. So thank you so very much for coming here. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.